Today we'll be discussing the new religious movements that took place in the Indian subcontinent around 600 BC, and also we shall discuss the material background behind the rise of this new religious movements. So first let us think of the period. When we think of 600 BC, we know that this period is known in early Indian history as the early historic period, because here we find a significant change from the earlier Vedic period, and this significant change is reflected in the process of state formation, urbanization, monetization. In fact, we have the beginning of urban centers during this period. We have the transformation from the Janapadas to the Mahajanapadas during this period, and also we find that the earliest coins of India, that is the Panchmak coins, were issued, saw the beginning during this period. And what is important is that when we think of the production process, we find that the iron implements or iron were found in the archaeological context right from 800 BC. It was actually the 600 BC when we find the beginning of iron implements and iron plough being used in the production process. As a result, there was huge surplus in production, particularly in the Ganga Valley. And when we are talking of these things, we are focusing our attention in the Ganga Valley. And so we find that with this surplus, the new urban centers are coming up. And as a result, we find new social groups. So one of the very important social groups were the Sethis. Another one related to agriculture production were the Gahapatis. So this new social group was quite wealthy, but if you think of the fourfold Varna formation of the early Indian society, we find that these social groups were not getting their adequate prestige. In spite of them having been wealthy or having wealth, they were not getting their prestige, and as a result, they were looking for something which would actually enhance their social position. And with this backdrop, we find that people were also very restless about the rituals of the Vedic period. And as you know, the Vedic period saw the beginning of the sacrifices. These religious sacrifices asked for elaborate rituals, and people had to spend a lot, which always it was not possible for the common man. So when we have this sort of background, there was naturally a very dissatisfaction among the people. The society was throbbing with dissatisfaction, and in this context we find the rise of the new religious movements, and the religious reformers were Mahavira, Buddha, then we have nihilism, we have Charvakism, we have Ajivikas. And all these religious reformation movements, they were actually a protest against the Vedic Brahmanism, or we can say the protest against the rituals that were being followed by the Brahmanical religious processes. And this is not a singular case, because if we look at the world context, then also we find that during this period, the 600 BC or around 600 BC, we have religious reformation in China in the form of Laoism and Confucianism. We have religious reformation in Persia, where we have rise of Zoroastrianism. So this was the common formation that we have all over the world, and India was no exception. But in India, we have several kinds of sectarian movements, and therefore today we are going to discuss these sectarian movements and the backdrop of the material milieu. Gautama Buddha was born in a Shakya clan. His father was Shuddhodana and his mother Mayadevi. He was brought up by his stepmother and aunt Gautami. And he was born in Lumbini. And we know that we are definite about it, that he was born in Lumbini from the Ashokan inscription, the Lumbinidae pillar inscription, where we find that it is inscribed Hida Buddha Jate. So here was born Buddha. So therefore we are quite sure that we know about it from the literary text as well as from inscriptional references. Now when Buddha became at the age of 29, Buddha actually, he was very worried when he saw the sufferings, and there were four sights which troubled him. One was that of an old man, one was that of a sick man, one was that of an ascetic, and one was that of a corpse. And when he saw this sight, he was so perturbed that he decided that the human existence is full of sufferings, and so he didn't want to live in this atmosphere. He just left the house at the age of 29 with his favorite horse Kantaka and his charioteer, whose name was Chetada. Now what happened is that while he just went out, he met Alara Kalama, who was a saint and a propounder of Sankhya philosophy. So he wandered with this saint Alara Kalama for several days and several months, and actually he went through strong penance with him, because Sankhya philosophy propagates penance and for self-mortification. But after all these things, Gautama felt that it was not worthwhile to do this because he was not getting an answer to his questions. So what he did, he left the company of Alara Kalama, and then he came near Bodh Gaya. The original name was Uruvela, present day Bodh Gaya. He sat under a peepal tree, and which turned to be the famous Bodhi Vriksha, and on the bank of the river Niranjana, and there he meditated for several days. And after 40 days of meditation, he attained enlightenment. He became a Buddha or a Tathagata. After that, we find that he started preaching, and his first students were the five disciples who sat together in the deer park at Sharnath, and there he started his teaching, which is known as Dharma Chakra Pravartana, that is turning the wheel of law.
Dhamma does not mean religion, it means law that controls our life, law that controls our actions, and that we are in full mastery of our own action, and our own action will only determine our future, that is whether we will attain nirvana or not.
The main important teachings of Gautama Buddha were the Arya Satyas, the Four Noble Truths, the four Arya Satyas. And what are these? As I mentioned earlier, that his primary thought, his primary feeling was that this whole human life is full of suffering. So the first truth was that worldly existence is suffering, and this suffering increases because that is dukkha. He uses the term dukkha, and this suffering increases because we have thirst for worldly life, and where he calls it Trishna. So when we have thirst, we have dukkha, and this dukkha, and we have thirst, and this thirst has to be suppressed. So it has to be suppressed, and that can be done by nirodha, that is the destruction of the cause of sufferings. And this cessation of suffering can be had only when we attain nirvana, that is the final enlightenment.
He says that there is dukkha in the world. And what is dukkha? He classified dukkhas into 7, as I had said, that janma or birth, jara, that is old age, vadhi is disease, mrityu is death, and then priyo viyoga, that is separation from the loved ones, or priya samyoga, association with someone or some things that we do not like, and ipshita alabha, that is the failure to attain what we crave to do, what we aspire to do. So these are the 7 dukkhas according to Buddha, and these dukkha causes all the sorrow. But although he started very pessimistically, he proceeded optimistically, saying that dukkha has a hetu, that is, dukkha has a cause. And what is the cause of the dukkha? The cause of the dukkha is tanha or trishna. Tanha or trishna. And what are the 3 trishnas that we have? The 3 trishnas are bhava trishna, desire for long life, vibhava trishna, desire for wealth, and sukha trishna, the everlasting desire for happiness. And dukkha is therefore born out of this tanha. But there is a way for the extinction of this tanha. Tanha can be annihilated. And then he prescribed the eightfold path, the Arya Ashtangika Marga. That is, by following which one can be free from all desires. So, it was not an extreme path, which we would rather later see the Jains prescribed. It was not a path of total abstinence. It was not a path of total indulgence. It was the middle path, Majjhima Pantha.
The best part of Buddhism is that Buddhism preaches us that an ordinary man can attain nirvana even if he does some kind of good work. For example, we have inscriptions of later period where it is said that even if you dug a well, you'll find that you are doing some kind of merit. And this merit will finally lead you to your enlightenment, will finally give you nirvana.
What is nirvana? Nirvana is the end of all suffering. It is the end of all desire. And it also gives freedom from the cycle of birth and rebirth, which brings suffering in every life. So, it is the end of all desire, and we find that the consciousness, he does not believe in soul. He does not believe in the Upanishadic concept of soul, although he believes in karma. He believes in transmigration. He believes in rebirth. But he says that it is the end of all karma, it is the end of all desire, it is the end of rebirth. And nirvana, how does he explain nirvana? How does he describe nirvana? It is ajara, that is, it is free from all sorts of illness, all sorts of incapability. It is abadhi, that is, it is free from all kinds of illnesses. And it is ashoka, it is free from all kinds of sadness. So, it is some sort of a blissful existence, although Buddha did not believe in any kind of permanence of any state. So, for him, there is no soul, it is consciousness, and he also does not believe in the permanence of the nirvana.
Buddha taught the language of the common people. He was not using Sanskrit when he was talking to his disciples. He was using Prakrit, which was, and that too Magadhi Prakrit, because it was the language of Magadha. So he could easily reach the common people. Another very important thing about Buddhism that one has to remember is that Buddha fought against the caste system. He fought against the superstitions, the rituals of the Brahmanical world. And as a result, everybody was welcome to his Sangha. Critics, of course, say that he fought against it, but he could not totally disown the caste system. He could not do away with the caste system. But at least he tried to have his Sanghas where people from all sections of society would be welcome.
We find that many of the Buddha's patrons were the great Shreshthis or the great businessmen. They were the great men involved in agriculture, because you see, these people, they have been toiling hard, they have been working very hard, and it was in Buddha's religion that they got a very, very important status, the Gahapatis or the great agriculturists and the Nagara Shreshthis. And they were the one who extended full patronage to Buddhism, and it was because of them, perhaps, there were so many converts, if we can use the word, or so many who had embraced Buddhism as an answer to their philosophical queries. So we find that there were many converts to Buddhism, and we find these yellow-robed messengers of hope. They are traversing the whole of eastern India. They have among their patrons great kings like Bimbisara, who was incidentally also distantly related to both Buddha and Mahavira. There were many Raj Purushas, there were many warriors, there were many agriculturists, there were Shudras, there was this highway robber called Angulimala, as we know, there was this great courtesan known as Amrapali. Nobody was cast aside. Nobody was left out. Anybody who wanted to accept the gospel of Buddha or Tathagata, as he was known as, was incorporated into this new belief. And we find that thousands were converted and monasteries were being set up, the doors of which were not closed to women. So far, the concept was that women were the gates to hell, but we find that Buddha, he involved women, he accepted women also in his monastic establishment.
After attaining this enlightenment, Buddha went back for preaching his religion to different people. He talked about the maximum good for the maximum people, and his whole idea was, we have this term Bahujana Hitaya, Bahujana Sukhaya, that it should be the well-being should not be limited to a few, it should be for everybody. So everybody should be happy, everybody should have a wonderful life. So this whole idea of Bahujana Hitaya, Bahujana Sukhaya was also very attractive to the common people.
Buddha, he came back to Kapilavastu, and we find that among his first disciples was his own mother, stepmother Gautami. Incidentally, we might say that Buddha's own mother Maya Devi died at childbirth, and he was reared up by his stepmother Gautami, and that is from where he got his name Gautama Buddha. So Yashodhara, his wife, whom he had abandoned at a very young age, so we find Yashodhara was converted, Gautami was converted, Gautami became a nun also, and we find all these teachings of Buddha, the sayings of Buddha, not in any text which was contemporary to his time, because all his teachings were later only put to writing. They continued in the form of tradition, in the form of oral tradition. All of us know that the oral tradition is very, very strong in India as a media for preserving the wisdom of the generations, and also as passing it on to the other generations. But we find that with the passage of time, it was considered necessary to record the teachings of the Buddha, and this did not happen till the third Buddhist council at the time of Ashoka. We know that he was a very great patron of Buddhism. So at the third Buddhist council, we find that the Buddhist elders, because there were some intrusions, there were some unnecessary elements getting into the original teaching of the Buddha. So we find that they were all recorded, and this was known as the three Pitakas, or the three baskets. First is the Sutta Pitaka, which has got the life story, and also the teachings of the Buddha, and then there are the Vinaya Pitaka. Vinaya Pitaka is what? It is a thing of it is a text of monastic discipline, what the Buddhist monks were supposed to do. And third was the Abhidhamma Pitaka, that is the text which contains the philosophical and metaphysical expositions of Buddhist doctrines. So Sutta Pitaka is very important, and we also, along with this, we have the 5 Nikayas. Nikayas are the other sayings of the Buddha. There are also what the elders had to say. Elders had to expound about the Buddhist teachings. There are 5 such Nikayas. There is a Digha Nikaya, the Anguttara Nikaya, the Majjhima Nikaya, the Samyutta Nikaya, and finally the Khuddaka Nikaya. So these are the 5 Nikayas. So when we are studying Buddhism, this is very important that we remember that apart from the 3 baskets or the 3 Pitakas, these Nikayas and especially the Sutta Nipata, which is a part of the Sutta Pitaka, is very important. So knowing the sources is also very important, because this corpus of Buddhist literature is also the gems that we have in our study of this great religious tradition. Buddha, for 40 years of his life, more than 40 years of life, he had been a wandering monk. He is preaching the newly acquired wisdom through his meditation and passing it on to everyone, and trying to prove the futility of bloodshed, the futility of the caste system, the futility of the rituals. And also there was no he did not consciously preach the existence of God. He remained sort of silent. But we find that with the Buddha, and we will see late Mahavira, they did not believe in God as the creator of the universe. And they did not believe in the fact that man's salvation is is in any way dependent on the will of that entity, or that rituals, sacrifices, prayers have any role to play in the attainment of salvation. Man is the creator of his own destiny, and it is man's action that will lead to the gradual perfection, and man will attain salvation. That is a cessation of the cycle of birth, because it is birth which creates desire, which means the accumulation of karma, and it's because of this pressure of the karma that a man is born and reborn in every generation, being condemned to suffer. So this was his this was a new truth that was taught by the Buddha, but at the same time he also laid down a very simple code of conduct which was to be followed in everyday life. That was the Panchashila, or the 5 codes of conduct: not to steal, not to tell lies, not to take life, that is ahimsa. Next is non-attachment, that is, do not feel too attached to anyone. And final was sort of continence, brahmacharya, as we might say. So these were the Panchashilas which were taught by Buddha. The first 3 would lead to dhyana, and the next 2 to pragya, and finally sambodhi. So these are the 3 which was preached by Buddha. There was a gradual escalation in the religious beliefs also, and we find that there is not much of religion in Buddha's teachings. We find there was more to do with one's own conduct. There was more to do with one's own self-improvement, and there was more to do with tolerance, that you tolerate, because out of tolerance this patience will come, and then the urge to strike others, to bring suffering to others, to cause bloodshed, that will gradually recede to the background, and one would concentrate more on self-perfection. But we find that Buddhism was gradually being divided into 2 kinds of 2 streams, the Hinayana and the Mahayana. The Hinayana believing in the self-perfection, that you to become an arhat or a worthy, you have to perfect yourself. You don't have anybody to help you. But from there we find this was also known as Theravada Buddhism in Sri Lanka, in Burma. It was known as Theravada Buddhism. That is the saying of the elders. That means who wanted to keep Buddha's teachings, the elders after Buddha, who wanted to keep the Buddhist teachings at their purest forms. And then there was a Mahayana Buddhism, to absorb more people. The later Buddhists felt that perhaps the mediation of some sort of a guru is essential, some sort of a preceptor is essential. So Mahayana is what? That one who has got Buddhahood in him, that is Bodhisattva, he delays his own nirvana for helping others, so that others can come out of the tamas, okay, into the land of enlightenment.
Buddha died, this term, it is known as the final blowing out, the Mahaparinirvana, and he died around 483 BC, and there is again a debate regarding his death. So the scholars generally believe that 483 BC was the time of Mahaparinirvana of Buddha. There is a story which says that when Buddha expired, then there was a clash among his disciples on his ashes. Who will take his ashes? And therefore it is said his relics were distributed among his disciples, and we have these relics distributed throughout India, where we have the stupas. Unfortunately, Buddhism did not survive in the Indian subcontinent. We find Buddhism in India till 13th century in some pockets, for example, southeastern Bangladesh, present-day Chittagong region, where Buddhism continued for a pretty long time, and even today we have living Buddhism there. But in other parts of the subcontinent, Buddhism withered away. On the other hand, the transmission of Buddhism to Central Asia, to China, was very successful. This transmission happened through the northwestern part of India, but it was very successful, and we find that a large section of Central Asia, China, and East Asia finally got converted to Buddhism.